Warning. The topics discussed on this podcast are subject to adult themes and languages. We seek to unravel the unexplained and unknown. This is Encounters.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Encounters. My name's Dakota.
And I'm Amanda.
And today, we are taking a treacherous dive into the monsters of Stranger Things and beyond.
Yes! Sorry.
If only you all knew how long the setup was to get to this.
Right.
Ooh, bitch, we could have even called it From the Upside Down and Beyond.
Is that what you want to call it?
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yes.
Anyways, today we are going to be taking 3 of the monsters from Stranger Things and giving you not only the Stranger Things down low, but a little bit of D&D lore mixed into what we find as their real-world cryptid personas.
Yes. And I want...
Well, wait. Yeah, go ahead. Talk.
Real quick, this was a suggestion from one of our listeners. So we want to just give a quick shout out to my good friend Allie. Thank you for suggesting this. We've had a lot of fun kind of jumping in and getting deeper into this because lucky for you all, we have a certified dungeon master in the house tonight.
Where?
You, bitch.
I know. Yes. I'm relatively new to D&D. I've been playing in 5th edition, but I absolutely love it. And I've got some of the books here and some of the deep dive lore for us to examine.
Yeah.
Not all that much, because trying to cram 3 different things into one episode is going to be wild enough.
Right.
Not to mention 3 different worlds for 3 different things. Parallel universes and all.
Exactly. For me, I watched Stranger Things when it first came out. Really loved it. Thought it was a fantastic show. I just haven't caught up with it. So I have not seen the last 2 seasons. But luckily, once again, Dakota just watched all 4 seasons here recently, right?
Yeah, I did not get the Stranger Things bug whenever it first came out.
Real quick.
I don't know why. I don't watch things when they first come out.
No, I know why. You said, fuck them kids. I was like, Dakota, have you seen Stranger Things? And you said, fuck them kids. I don't watch shows about children.
Those are my kids now, though. I love them. Leave Dustin alone. He's the best one.
Right. Oh my God.
No, seriously. It's actually an amazing show. I sat down recently and watched 1 through 3 when 4 came out. So I got to see all of them back to back to back. And then I am excited for season 5. So before we go any further, it is probably very important to put here, ding, 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 this is going to be a spoilers episode. If you've not seen all of Stranger Things, or you don't want to know things about D&D or real world shit, you might want to turn this episode off. There will be spoilers after this. I don't know if there'll be lots, I don't know if there'll be a little bit, but there'll be some.
Yeah.
So, you've been warned.
Warned.
Alright, up first, Amanda and I have decided we are going to cover 3 separate cryptids, or 3 separate monsters. First is the Demogorgon. So the Demogorgon is also known as the monster, and it's this humanoid, reptilian-style, bipedal creature that has an open face like a Venus flytrap. It's said that it was created and made trans-dimensional contact through a gateway known as the Upside Down. The Demogorgon was tall and thin humanoid creature with elongated limbs. Its head appeared to lack facial features until it unfurled its flesh like a flower to reveal petals lined with sharp teeth. And it opens its mouth large and wide. The Demogorgon's arms and digitigrade legs end in claws, and its skin is slimy. It communicates and often makes low guttural growls and shrieks. It is known when it shows up to be able to flicker lights on and off and affect electricity. So Amanda, you've seen season 1, so the Demogorgon was one of the featured monsters in season 1.
Yeah.
They're known to also be able to rip interdimensional portals so they can cross from the other side into our reality and hunt. Later seasons have evolving statutes, so you see them go from being this small little tadpole-like iguana creature to being the full Demodog, which is another form of the Demogorgon, except it's more dog-like. It doesn't stand up to be the 7 to 8 foot tall creature that we see in the later seasons that they're fighting in Russia. There's bats in the newest season, so this is a new iteration that we've seen from them. So this creature seems to be a terrestrial being to the Upside Down. That is just how those creatures are. They all look the same. The humanoid creatures, the dog creatures, and the bat creatures all have the same kind of formation, and they are original to the Upside Down, as you see in later seasons, like in season 4, which we will cover when we get into the later portions of this episode. Amanda, what was your initial reaction when you saw the Demogorgon in seasons 1 and 2?
I fucking hated that thing. I don't like the teeth thing when it because it doesn't have any eyes or anything on its face. It just opens up to all these teeth and things. Hated it. I did love season 2 with the Demodog though. I don't know why that thing was cute as fuck. But they turn into such terrifying things. They kind of remind me almost of the monsters from A Quiet Place as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where they're also kind of just big and freaky and fast, and I hate it because it scares me. I remember being very scared by them.
That's very fair. They're terrifying creatures.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a mixture of the creatures from Slither.
Ew, those little slimy.
Yeah, Dart when we see Dart in season 2, the small version of what would become a Demodog, that looks like what the slivers look like.
Yeah.
And then the grown up is this weird amalgamation of the Tooth Fairy from Cabin in the Woods and Alien from Alien.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah, the design is really, really good. Some people...
Oh, amazing.
Some people kind of compare it to Pennywise in its monster-esque form, but...
Okay, I don't see that, but I'm not going to say some people are wrong.
I saw a picture of them side by side and they kind of look alike, but the Duff brothers say no. They compare it to... Yeah, isn't that them? Isn't that what their names?
I think so.
It might be something else. Sorry if that's not what they are, their names. But they more compare it to a shark on land, because I guess they can smell blood from a far away or some shit.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a good interpretation of how this thing interacts with its world.
Yeah. So they're just really terrifying, and I just remember, and the last thing I remember seeing is the end of season 2. Where they're trying to get out of somewhere and they're just surrounded by all these, I think they were the dog forms, and it was just being just oh my god, so scary.
Oh yeah, and I mean in the latest season when they're being swarmed by the bats, it's even more terrifying because there's hundreds of these things in the air.
Yeah.
Flying. Awful.
Yeah, no. That kind of reminds me of Resident Evil, the movie with all the crows. The zombie crows.
That's exactly what it should remind you of.
Even though I haven't
So the Demogorgon in Stranger Things has some unique and special abilities. It's known for being able to do interdimensional travel, what we talked about earlier, by being able to move between the dimensions of the Upside Down and Hawkins, Indiana. It creates gates that are temporary, allowing it to return to its gate to go back in. We see this used not only in the later years when they're trying to open the gate, but when Nancy and the crew get trapped in the Upside Down. They exhibit superhuman strength, superhuman durability, have telekinesis powers or telekinetic energy, they can pull things and move things around, unlocking doors. They have blood detection, much like Amanda said earlier, being a shark on land. and their healing is extremely fast. So they are an apex predator in Hawkins, Indiana.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't think there's anything else on the Stranger Things monster. It is heavily featured. It is utilized first in Stranger Things' season when they're playing the Dungeons & Dragons game. The Dungeon Master's like, you face the Demogorgon, and quite obviously it doesn't look like the monster that we see here. It looks more like the monster that we'll be getting to, but it's really interesting because in D&D it's such a heavy, big monster, supposedly one of the last monsters you'd ever face, and to start there in those early moments of the season, you're just kind of like, oh fuck, that's gonna be a big thing. So to attach that name to it, you would imagine that these creatures are the biggest and baddest creatures in the Stranger Things universe, but they actually are not. We'll get there by the end of this week.
Yeah, they keep getting bigger and badder, huh?
Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to say about the Stranger Things?
Well, I thought there was something really interesting about how D&D was used for the kids and how it kind of helped them cope with what was going on all around them because they were so in the world of D&D and they were kind of used to this world of monsters, and how they assigned the names to each of these monsters that they faced. I found that it was a really interesting move on the creators. Like, it makes a lot of sense. I agree. Yeah. And it's like, it kind of makes sense why they're not they're actually fighting against this instead of cowering, because they're used to being these kind of warriors in this game, and then it comes to real life and they're still trying to be these warriors.
And I have a feeling the final monster for season 5 is going to be a red dragon.
That's what I was
really
hearing.
Excited.
And I don't know much about the red dragon, but I was hearing it was more intense than Vecna or whatever. Sorry, am I saying that right?
Yeah, Vecna's correct.
Yeah. So I, who is not a D&D player, but even I've heard about this red dragon and how that might be at the end. Because season 5 is their last season, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Coming to an end. So moving into the D&D element of it, we get to the Demogorgon, and he has a couple of names or titles. The Prince of Demons, the Deep Father, the Sibilant Beast, the Master of Spiraling Depths, the Master of Mysteries, King of the Deviants and Tanari, Prince and Lord of all that swims in darkness, the Demogorgon, also sometimes referred to as the Imprisoned One. So many fucking names. But Amanda, you've seen pictures of the Demogorgon.
Yes.
And you've seen the regular Demogorgon. What are your thoughts on the actual Demogorgon here?
Yeah, I thought it was good. I don't know why. I thought it was going to look more like the Stranger Things monster, and it doesn't. It's got 2 heads.
Yup.
Which are
2
monkeys.
baboon heads.
Yeah, with
blue and red faces.
Which was interesting. And
it towers over a full 18 feet in height, and it has the body that is that of a snake and a great ape all in one.
It's just a lot of tentacles.
A lot of tentacles and a forked tail.
Okay.
So it is said to be the mistaken one, the primordial ooze of evil. So this is the first demon. And supposedly how demon hell works in D&D is if you survive everyone trying to kill you, you're the king. So in all of the different planes of hell, you can carve out your own kingdom. And the Demogorgon took over Abyss and had a city named Abysm and said, you know what, I know me then by my best name, mortal. You face Demogorgon, Prince of Demons. And there's this whole thing where these 2 other demons are trying to kill him constantly. And he's like, nah, I'm good. I'm the actual demon. So when we look at Mordenkainen's Tomb of Foes from Dungeons & Dragons 5e, it says, the Demon Lord is a meld of different forms with a Saurian lower body and clawed webbed feet, as well as suckered tentacles sprouting from its shoulders of a great ape torso, surmounted by 2 hideous simian heads named Amiel and Hathredia, both equally mad. Their gaze brings madness and confusion to any who confront it. It's even said that if you stare at the symbol of the Demogorgon for too long, you'll go crazy. Not really much is known about the Demogorgon in Dungeons & Dragons. It kind of came in and was the best demon. No one could kill it, so it stayed the Prince of Demons. It does have its own campaign called Out of the Abyss, and really, they just are a demon lord where the two heads are constantly arguing, and one thinks that it could be better off without the other one. But of course, if it was to try and separate itself, it would die because it can't live without its other head. It's not meant to be a demon or monster you fight in D&D. When it shows up, it's kind of like, oh, okay, fuck, let me get the hell out of here. In fact, in earlier editions of D&D, it was one of the highest rated critical monsters you could have on the board. And then later editions introduced the things like the Tarrasque and other big creature monsters that you're like, oh, no, I don't want to deal with that ever. Run. So, when it appears in Stranger Things up front, you're like, oh shit, this is going to be a real crazy monster they're having to deal with. Yeah. And then we find out it's more of a lower level monster.
Right.
There's lots of other things in D&D, but that's the main point of it. So, in the real world,
yes,
we get what for the Demogorgon?
It's an even crazier story when it comes to the Demogorgon in the real world. So if we go back, it was really popularized back in the 1300s. That's when you really started seeing it appear in like Latin literature. But you need to go back even further to kind of get where the Demogorgon was kind of created. Okay?
Okay.
So it's known to be the father of Greek and Roman gods. Like, that's the definition of the Demogorgon. And it's the reason a lot of people think this and why it kind of went this way is because it resembles two Greek words. One is demos, which means people, and the other one is Gorgon, which refers to Medusa and her two monstrous sisters, who, as we know, if you stare at them, you turn into stone. So it's interesting, even in D&D, if you stare at like the symbol, you go crazy.
Yeah.
So I think maybe they're even like kind of going off of that with that too, the Gorgon aspect of it. But the really interesting part about the Demogorgon is it's actually not a real word. So what happened is, as I said before, it really got popularized in Latin literature. So I got this information, by the way, off of an article called
Atlas Obscura.
Oh, girl. You said it. Thank you, Dakota.
Obscura.
So, according to C.S. Lewis, a medieval scribe was reading Greek word. Oh my gosh. Okay, I want to say this off bat. I'm not really good at pronouncing these names and words, so I'm going to apologize, okay? So it's a Greek word called...
The demiurge?
Yes, the demiurge. The demiurge? Either demiurge or demiurge. I don't know exactly. But this word means... It's the word which Pluto named the creation of the universe. So when this scholar was reading this word, they accidentally wrote down Demogorgon instead. And this blunder, this typo, like, really kind of took off. Because at the time, a lot of these Italian writers were writing about this, like, scary underworld demon god, but they were not giving it a name. It was kind of like the Lord Voldemort of the time, right? So it really left all of this up for interpretation. So that's when this Italian writer named Baracco is the one who really gave it a definition. I butchered that. I'm so sorry. But he gave it the definition of being the father of the Greek gods, right? And he lived near Florence. And he really loved referring to Greek text, but he didn't know how to read it. And he didn't understand it very well. So that's when the Demogorgon name took over and became gospel, and he assigned it to be the Greek, father. And it, like, from that point on, it was canon. Everyone else just kind of went with it. So you start just seeing it pop up everywhere. And its most popular mention of the Demogorgon at the time was back in 1820 during the second act of Prometheus Unbounding, where these two sisters are embarking on a quest to the underworld, and they have to go pay this supreme tyrant called the Demogorgon a visit to pursue him to help out Prometheus. So when these sisters finally get to the cave and see this Demogorgon, it's this dark cave, and they say it's this mighty darkness, and it throws off rays of gloom. But it was actually surprisingly chatty, and they convinced him, and he helped his visitors with the rest of their quest. And by the end of the play, he was giving a speech about, like, love, praising love and all this stuff. So from these points, the Demogorgon just kind of became this, like, prince of the underworld, this, like, really dark, evil character for a lot of different poems and stories. And then eventually it kind of ends up in D&D and taking on a different life of its own. Because originally, the Demogorgon didn't have a shape, it didn't have a certain look or a certain power like the other Greek gods did. It was just this very unknown, gloomy, looming character.
Yeah, like, to speak of it was to bring it around, and you didn't want to bring it around because then you'd find out what it did.
Yes, and it was just, like, full of darkness. Even at the beginning of that show I just talked about, they were scared of it, but by the end, it turned out to be, like, a really nice guy. So that's pretty much, like, the basic background of the Demogorgon. It started out as a typo, so you can actually literally go back and see where this started, and then it just kind of took off and got a life of its own from there.
Man, they really love to take a demon and twist its shape to fit their agenda.
Right? It's the fact that, like, one guy was like, oh yeah, no, he's the father of all the Greek and Roman gods, and everyone else was like, totally, that's awesome, and just went off because someone got what Pluto called the creation wrong.
Go off, sis, go off.
I don't know, it's just, to me, it just shows the power of, like, words.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, we decided it is, and it was. Kind of like a tulpa, like, we decide something is a thing and it becomes a thing.
Exactly. Well, from Venus flytrap monster to double baboon demon god to formless shape, the Demogorgon fills various different branches. But what about the other formless mysterious entity in Stranger Things, the MindFlayer? So the MindFlayer in Stranger Things was also known as the Hive Mind, the Shadow Monster, the Particles, and it was a gigantic, looming, 50 stories tall spider shadow creature. It took on many different physical forms. At one point, it looked like ash falling. At other points, it looks like a storm. But most of the time, we see it... Oh, even in reality, when it takes a reality form, it is like a spider meat monster. But this basically operated as a psychic hive mind link. It communicated with the Demogorgons through the vines of the Upside Down, and it was able to open gates in the Upside Down through interdimensional travel and possess people on the other side of the realm, or I guess in the parallel universe. So while it was in the Upside Down, it could reach over into Hawkins, and it actually was possessing people, going through their daily lives, bringing them into the hive mind and being one. Eventually, it led to the demise in the old Hawkins Mall, or I guess new Hawkins Mall. They were liquefying the people, and it turned into a meat monster on our side of reality in its proxy form. So kind of just like a gelatinous cube of people soup. This is the monster we see for the next 3 seasons. It is kind of the psychic link from the Upside Down to Hawkins. Will sees it a lot as a threatening homage to the Mind Flayer. When people are possessed, they are called the Flayed. And the Duffer Brothers, the Duffers, it's their second D&D creature named. It was actually more of an H.P. Lovecraft interdimensional being approach kind of look. Mm-hmm. It's what it reminds me of. But as you transition, you find it is also in link and control with some of the other main monsters in Stranger Things. But it itself is its own kind of cloud of spores that just serves to know more and control things. Do you have anything you want to say about the Mind Flayer?
Not really. I do remember, like, the connection it had with Will, especially in, like, the second season. But since I haven't really seen the third season, I don't remember much about it. It kind of fades into the background for me, to be honest.
I mean, that's good. That's what it wants. It wants to disappear so it can just control you.
Right.
Well, in D&D, the Mind Flayer are a race of octopus-faced people that breed by putting tadpoles into people's bodies. Then it takes over and you become a Mind Flayer. Alright, so you've seen... I sent you a picture of what a actual Mind Flayer in D&D looks like.
Oh, okay, yes. Got a vagina face.
These are psionic creatures. They seek to control and dominate. I mean, everything that you see with them and associate with them is very much about taking over, controlling, enslaving, and becoming treated like gods. They seek dominion over all life forms and have a really bad attitude, if we're just being absolutely honest about it. They are thought to be utterly alien and just have far-reaching schemes. There is a whole subsect of lore. An entire race of people are made slaves by these Mind Flayer creatures. And it brings about a rebellion. They're seen a lot in space-themed campaigns because they're more alien-like creatures. That makes sense. I can really see where the Duffer Brothers were going for with the Mind Flayer in Stranger Things versus the Mind Flayer in D&D. Because it's all about the mind control. And again, like you said, Amanda, the kids are using it to make reality for themselves a little bit. And the one thing at the time that they had were these squid people or octopus people that were trying to take over the minds of hundreds of thousands of people to enslave them. Much like how the hive mind operates, ultimately leading to massive self-sacrifice in them all. I could go on forever. There's so much D&D lore about
the Mind Flayer.
But really all you need to know is they're generally evil. They generally want to control you. And their form of pet is a giant brain with 4 legs that will jump into your body, eat your brain out, sit there, and when the only way to find out if your brain has been taken by a brain devourer is to lop your head off and see if it's in there. Could be in there, could be not. Sounds like an ineffective way to find things to me.
Sounds like the Salem witch trials. Or like, you know,
exactly.
Yeah.
If she drowns, she's not a witch.
Oh, man.
But they love brains. They love eating them. It's their favorite meal.
Yeah.
They primarily use powerful psychic abilities to mentally enslave other beings. And most recently, they've been given their proper racial name as Illithid.
Oh, okay. They're the Illicid? Is that their race? Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're their creature race is illithids. And they very much look like an H.P. Lovecraft wet dream, too.
Yeah.
Just to be absolutely honest.
Oh, yeah. I can see why the kids would call it that, like, especially with the octopusy look. I'm sorry, the look of it.
It's just a really interesting concept and utilization of the D&D monster for the show, and it really works. I really love hive minds. I think they're terrifying. And we kind of thought that in reality, when we were to take the Mind Flayer, specifically the idea of this ultimate being watching and trying to take control, we saw that they were much like what creature, Amanda?
Shadow people.
Yeah, shadow people.
Yeah. And it just reminds me a lot of, like, alternate dimensions, these interdimensional beings coming into our dimension and watching us. The Mind Flayer obviously has a more control over its victims. I don't know that we call people who see shadow people victims, but it just really reminded me of a story from our Glitch in the Matrix episode. So I'm actually going to drop that in right here.
In the distance, they can see this like lake, this really beautiful lake, and the moon is shining down on it, which there wasn't any moon in the sky before. They also start noticing trees. Things are just really, really odd. And now they're really uncomfortable because they have no idea where they are. Up ahead, they see these lights, so they decide to drive towards them. And once they get there, they notice it looks like kind of a restaurant or something. And they see a neon sign, but they can't read what it says. They said that it's just a glowing symbols and just really weird. When suddenly, just a group of very tall people burst out of this restaurant. Like, a crazy amount, just a huge number. It seemed like they were upset that the girls had arrived there, and they were pointing at the girls, and they were pointing at the car, and one of the girls in the back seat actually is the one who noticed it, and she starts screaming at the top of her lungs. She's like, "We gotta get out of here, please just like step on it." Other girl in the back seat notices as well and starts screaming at the top of her lungs to get out of there. So they back up and they just take off. So the girls are terrified. The girls in the back are sobbing. The girls in the front don't really quite understand what is going on when they start noticing headlights coming, racing at them. Girls in the back seat turn and look, and they're screaming, "Oh my God, they're coming after us, go faster." They say they see these egg-shaped vehicles whirling towards them. They say there's 2 wheels in the front and only 1 wheel in the back. There's only 1 headlight, and they're just racing towards these girls. So obviously they're freaking out. They're going as fast as they can. These egg-shaped cars are catching up with them. They're all freaking out when suddenly they fly out of this canyon and they're back on the desert road. Their car kind of stalls in the sand. The engine ends up dying. They crash at the bottom of a arroyo. And at this point, the girls are not hurt, but they're terrified. And now their car is totaled. 3 of the tires are flat. Like I just said, the engine was dead. So they decide just to sleep in the car until sunrise, and they will then walk towards the highway and try to find somebody. And that's what they did. They end up finding a patrol car, and they wave it over and they tell the trooper. The trooper actually takes down their kind of story. They go back to this car. They do notice there's no tire tracks really leading to where the girls went off into this arroyo. It's kind of like they just appeared there, and then the tire tracks kind of show where the crash is. No one can really explain it. The girls didn't want to really give their names and talk about it, so that's why we don't have names. But this was a crazy story. And I got this story actually off of the website before it was news.
I think Alternate Dimensions episode is a great one to listen to if you're into stuff like Stranger Things, because we go into a lot of how the Matrix and reality could be broken, a couple of conspiracies and ideologies about parallel universes. It's a really fun listen. I highly recommend it. I had a good time doing it. I hope you have a good time listening to it.
It was a fun one.
The Mind Flayer is a big baddie, though. Not only in Stranger Things, but in D&D. And shadow people freak me the fuck out, so...
It also reminds me of Resident Evil, I think, 5? With, like, the bugs that would kind of control people, right? You play Resident Evil 5?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm not good at shooter games.
Okay, then never mind. But that kind of reminds me of the same thing, because it's like a village in, like, I think Africa got taken over by this, like, parasite.
Oh,
thing.
I did play that once. Yes.
Yeah. But that, I mean, they probably, who knows? Let's move on to the big baddie. The next big baddie.
And finally, the biggest baddie so far. We get our main antagonist of the 4th season, Vecna. Now, I think it's really important here to again stress spoilers. We have spoilers. We are going to talk about Season 4 of Stranger Things. If you don't want to continue, please don't continue. So, in Stranger Things Season 4, Vecna, as we later find out, is Henry Creel, who is another one of these children that was not from the Project MK Ultra, but also not part of it. He was a child that experienced supernatural ESP abilities at a really young age and almost killed his father intentionally. And then kind of woke up in this military facility in this program and was a product of medical military training, quote unquote. You know, do this or I'm going to shock you. I'm your papa now. Later on, what we see is he has a chip implanted in him. He gets in a fight with 11. 11 pushes him into the interdimensional door. He becomes a monster. He's one of the first humans to enter the Upside Down. It completely changes him, burns the fuck out of him. And then he literally becomes Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street. The way that he hunts, the way that he goes after the 4 victims, or any of his victims. It's very much Boogeyman, I'm coming in your dreams to get you. The Vecna in Stranger Things is motivated in murdering people based on their biggest trauma. So he makes them feel guilt, he makes them feel blame, basically gets them to commit to his will, and then he sacrifices them, making a portal at their death location. After he gets 4 of them, he rips a hole in time and space and is able to cross into reality to fight 11, who sent his ass to the Upside Down at the very beginning. Let's see. There's a lot that could go down, and we could talk about with Vecna in Stranger Things. I think it's best to leave it up to you all to watch and see all of the wonderful theatrics, but what I will tell you is he looks like a hot, veiny mess. He is somewhere between looking like Freddy Krueger and looking like Groot. And he has these long, sharp tendrils. He's always got vines all around him. We see several transitions of him. We see him as the crazy sociopath child, number 1. We also see him as Henry Creel. Another really great tie here, when he is the young boy, is his father is actually played by Robert Englund, who plays Freddy Krueger.
Oh, really?
And you find that one of the only ways to escape Vecna is by breaking his mental control over you, finding music that makes you happy, and having yourself led out of this manipulative control he has of you. But much like all the other creatures, we see an evolution, and the longer Henry Creel, or Vecna, is in the Upside Down, the more decayed, the more monstrous he becomes, ultimately going into all the crazy things like... I'm gonna send you a picture, Amanda.
Okay.
Like this.
He looks like the fucking Mind Flayer.
It does kind of look like the Mind Flayer. I think it's important to understand, too, Vecna found this cloud and worked with the Mind Flayer, so basically all of the monsters lead back to Vecna being the big bad monster, which is really funny considering that the Demogorgon is known as the Prince of Demons. Yet here it is on the lower rung where Vecna is in control. So, some of the powers and abilities of Vecna in Stranger Things are telepathy and psychic projection, being able to physically be connected by the mind. Mindscape creation, being able to craft and create things. Gate creation, so we see with the Demogorgon, they were able to hunt and open temporary gates. Well, Vecna is able to create permanent gates by killing people. The hive mind connection, telekinesis and pain inducement, psionic resistance, regenerative healing, and verbal manipulation. So, not only can they do all of these things with their power, he's very, very manipulative and charismatic and able to trick people into believing things or doing things of their own free will, like many of the deaths we see. Highly recommend. One of the best monsters they have. Jamie Campbell Bower does an amazing job as Vecna. And it's really cool to see the mix of real acting with the suit plus special effects and digital effects. Yeah. Really awesome.
I love a practical effect, man.
Do you have anything you want to say about Vecna in the season 4 of Stranger Things?
I have nothing to say because I don't know him. We have not been introduced yet.
Girl, I highly recommend. It's a great season. I couldn't stop watching whenever we started.
Yeah.
And it really, 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 really reminds me of Nightmare on Elm Street. Right down to they have a scene where Vecna's trying to come through the wall and you just see him hit the wall and come through it almost like the scene where Freddy comes through the ceiling in one of the shows. I just love it. It's great.
Yeah, I love me some Nightmare on Elm Street.
So Vecna in D&D is a lot different. Vecna is an archlich who became a god at one point, but basically a big necromancer. If you look at Vecna side by side, I'll send you a new picture, Amanda, because I want to know what your reaction is to this. This is the updated Vecna. Vecna was a once human king and lich from Oerth, who ascended to godhood. He is considered to be one of the most powerful liches to dwell in the world, and has been undead for millennia. As a deity, Vecna appears as a decrepit lich, missing his left hand and his left eye. That is because these are necromantic tools that you can find, magic items. You can make dead people rise. It's horrible. They're bad, they're cursed, don't touch them. If your DM gives them to you, he's a bad person. I did that to my players. I am a bad person.
His eye and his hand?
Yes.
They're cursed if you find them?
Yes, they are ancient relics. They usually have to be replaced, and you can control and summon Vecna, and it's very wild. Has a bunch of worshippers, cult-like individuals that do his bidding. So, very much like the Mind Flayer again, having a hive mind that's connected to doing one mission. Very deep lore. It goes all the way back to the original D&D stories. So there's mountains and mountains of evidence about, or not evidence, but rather lore on Vecna. I think it's really fun. A lot of people can just sprinkle it into any campaign you want to utilize because it does have so much history to D&D. I have Magic the Gathering cards, funny enough, that are Vecna themed, It's just a tale as old as time, if you can imagine. Wizard wants power. Wizard gives up everything to get power. And traps himself in a phylactery so he can never die. That's all I got.
All right. So when it comes to the real world version of Vecna, me and Dakota kind of went back and forth on who we wanted to pick. And we landed on Rasputin.
Rah, rah, Rasputin, Russia's favorite libertine.
We also were thinking, who else were we thinking? Aleister
Crowley, the Grand Beast.
Yes, but we ended up going with Rasputin. Gregory? Not Gregory. I don't know how to say his first name. I'm not gonna lie.
Gregory?
That's what I thought. But Rasputin was born back in 1869. It was January 20th of 1869. And he was born out in Siberia, which is a very, very rough place to try to survive. It's a very, very cold place. A lot of people were sent out to Siberia if they were prisoners or going to like a work camp or even just like peasants. So when Rasputin was born, he was born a peasant. He was the first child to survive out of 7 for his parents. So already that was like a miracle in itself that he survived past childbirth, because she had already lost 7 kids before that. And from an early age, like when he was growing up, he was a lot of trouble, but he was also already being seen as like a future teller and a mystic, which was very popular in Russia at that time. Because everyone was going through so much like mysticism and hypnotism and all that stuff was really, really on the rise. So that's why he didn't get like burned and shit. Like people were into that at the time. And he already just grew up being known. Some people already thought of him as a very powerful person. He knew things about his neighbors that he shouldn't have known. It was just like there was something about him. So he also got away with a lot of stuff, but he was very much a troublemaker from a very early age. And he ended up getting married very young and having 3 kids, and that all lived out in Siberia, right? But at the age of 28, he decided to go on a spiritual kind of pilgrimage. Some say it's because like he stole a horse. He was known as like a horse thief. And like he ran to the monastery for like protection. And others say that like he was just going through a spiritual, like he wanted to go through a spiritual journey. So he went to this monastery. And this was this was called St. Nicholas Monastery, where he met this monk. I think he was a monk named Mercari, I think. Sorry, once again, sorry. And he spent several months there just like learning. He learned how to read a bit because as a peasant, he was illiterate. Like that's not something they learned. They learned how to farm and stuff like that. So he started to get like real knowledge. Well, I shouldn't say real knowledge. He started to like learn. Sorry, that's such an asshole thing. You should know how to make your own fucking food. Sorry. I do understand what I said. He started learning more things. He eventually started kind of going out and teaching and wandering the forest of like Siberia. And at the time there was like a cult that would meet out in this forest. And they were called the Callisti. And the way they were worshipped, they didn't feel the need necessarily to worship in the church or anything like the Romans Catholics were doing. What they would do is go out into the forest and they would work themselves up into this like frenzy, and then they would all fuck each other and have like a giant orgy. So that's how they got closer to God, right? So Rasputin found these people and he started kind of taking on these cultures. And the worst thing about Rasputin though is that he didn't bathe. He never bathed. He would go up to like 6 months without bathing. And he was having sex with so many people. And I just don't understand. It's just so gross to me. But anyway, I'll kind of get more into that in a second. But he kind of took this culture, and when he went back home, he talked his wife into letting him have the basement as the church, and he would continue to have orgies down in his basement because he was starting to get a cult-like following. Eventually, he says he got a vision from the Virgin Mary that he needed to go to St. Petersburg and save the royal family. And I know you would think to yourself, how is this peasant supposed to go and save the royal family? Well, that Mercury guy he knew from St. Nicholas Monastery was actually used to be one of the spiritual advisors for the royals. So he was able to get Rasputin like a meeting with these two other high-ranking priests, which I'm not even going to attempt their names. And at first, they were just put off by him. One thing, he smelled. He was disheveled. He had this long beard. Oftentimes, he would have food stuck in his beard. And he didn't care who you were. He always was like this. From, like, peasant to the fucking Tsar. He didn't care. He was always like this. So at first, the two priests were, like, put off by him. Just something about him made them feel like he was a holy man. He was able to predict things. He would tell the future. He was just able to like convince people. His charisma was on 20. My God. Like, this man had crazy charisma. And he was able to get close to the Romanovs. And
yeah, Tsar Nicholas.
Yes, and his wife Alexandria.
And their child Anastasia. Alive.
But the way he was able to get in close is because Alexandria had used a kind of a holy advisor before, and she believed that he was able to like help her have a son, but her son he was a hemophiliac, so anytime he got any kind of cut, he would bleed. He wouldn't stop bleeding. And so Rasputin came to her and was like, I need to see your son. I will heal your son. I forgot to mention that. He was also known as being a healer. And so what he ended up doing was kicking out the doctors. And the doctors were actually giving the boy aspirin. So he most likely didn't heal the boy of his ailment. But because...
just stopped having blood thinners given to him.
Exactly. So he was able to kind of convince the Tsar and his wife, like, look, I'm a healer. And then he started giving the Tsars drugs. He was giving him, like, all these kind of drugs. And the Tsar ended up getting addicted to the drugs. And because Rasputin had the drugs, he was getting addicted to Rasputin. And also, Rasputin's wife was, not Rasputin's wife, the Tsar's wife was also very addicted to him because she thought he was healing her and her family, where she pretty much gave him full range on everything, from her children to like infiltrating her cabinet at one point. Just full reign. So much so that people felt like he was actually the leader and was like a puppet master. Not only that, at the same time, he had this cult of women who were wanting to have sex with him because he had supposedly like a huge penis.
Fun fact.
Yes.
The only thing I know about Rasputin is that they have his pickled penis in a jar.
Yep.
Much like Vecna, where he has his hand or eye missing, Rasputin is missing his penis.
Yes, because he used it quite a lot. He was said to be having sex with Alexandria. Everybody, actually. Everybody's wife. Everybody. So, of course, he was starting to make enemies, right?
Everybody, everywhere. Everybody, everywhere.
And one of the sickest things to me is that he would go daily to bathhouses with prostitutes, but he would never bathe. What he would do, and here is a warning, I'm going to talk about like physical violence. So if that's something that upsets you, I'm just letting you know now. So what he would do is take these prostitutes to these bathhouses, and he said he was like actually having a spiritual war over his soul. So he would beat the sin out of them, because he was actually fighting off the devil. And then so he would beat these prostitutes and then have sex with them. It got to the point where he was leaving these bathhouses talking to himself and talking about the demons he was fighting. The two priests who kind of brought him into the family ended up finding him one of them like grabbed him by the penis and was like talking about how he was the Antichrist, and beat him with a crucifix.
Oh my god.
And so, of course...
This is not Christopher Lloyd and his little bat friend in the animated movie that I know so well.
Right. Eventually, Rasputin ended up running back to the Tsar and his wife and telling on these priests. They ended up getting exiled. And one of them ended up hiring this woman named Keoni. She was a prostitute who had been disfigured by one of her patrons, and he cut off her nose where she had a hole in her face. And so he hired her to kill Rasputin and made sure to tell her the harm that he was causing to other sex workers. So she went to his house. And he ended up going back to Siberia at this point. I did not mention that. So she went to his house in Siberia and just waited outside of his house. And when he left to go somewhere, he saw this woman and went to go preach to her, when she ended up stabbing him in the stomach so much that she pulled out his intestines. But that did not kill him. He actually survived. Yes, he survived. And on the same day that she tried to assassinate him, Franz Ferdinand was also assassinated. And as we know, this ended up starting World War I. And Tsar Nicholas went off to fight, even though Rasputin had written him a letter being like, don't go to war. All that will happen will be the blood of Russians all over the street type of shit, right? Rasputin ended up getting healed and going back to stay with Alexandria. That's when he was pretty much taking over, adding a lot of his people into her cabinet, all that kind of stuff. And so her nephew, whose name is Prince Felix Yusupov, sorry, I butchered that, decided that he was going to take matters into his own hands. But Rasputin already knew that he was going to die, so he wrote a letter saying that if he died by the hands of the Russian people, that the Romanov family would live on. But if anyone from the Romanov family were to kill him, that they would all be dead within 2 years. That's what Rasputin wrote to them. And one of their family members ended up killing him. But it wasn't super easy. So the plan was to invite him over and to poison him. So they made it look like they were having a dinner party, and they started feeding him cakes and alcohol and wine with cyanide in it. After he had enough cyanide to kill 5 people, he was still up, chilling, hanging out, having a good time, right? I just want to mention the way they talked Rasputin into coming over was that the prince said his wife had a sex addiction and that she needed to be healed. That's how they talked him into coming over.
Men.
Right? So they tried to poison him, didn't work. So they decided to straight up shoot him. So they shot him in the stomach, and then they went upstairs to celebrate. And when they came back, Rasputin was said to pop back to life, and he took off running. And so they chased after him and shot him point blank again, right? And then they ended up cutting a hole into the frozen ocean, or a frozen lake, and throwing his body into the lake. When he was found 2 days later, they performed an autopsy on him, and there was said to be water in his lungs. So some people say he came back to life again, and what actually killed him was the drowning. But as you can see, he went from peasant to the top advisor for the Tsar of Russia. And he thought he was all powerful. He had a cult that was following him around, to the point where this woman left her whole family to go and live with Rasputin in his apartment. Made sure that anyone who entered his apartment called Rasputin God. And so it was said that someone walked in on her holding his penis as she screamed that he was Christ and she was his. People were crazy for him. Did I mention that he didn't bathe?
Don't settle for anyone less than that, y'all.
It's insane. It was just a lot. Rasputin was a lot.
That is so much.
And this was a quick telling of his story, but like he was really known to be holy. Either people thought he was the second coming of Christ or that he was the Antichrist. That was the only two like fields he was put into. He was just seen as being such a holy, yeah.
That's fair, but people think the Antichrist comes every 5 years.
Yeah. He was also known for his stare, his hypnotic stare.
Yeah, I've seen some pictures of this man staring.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. I just thought it was because they were black and white pictures from the olden days, but it's really because he is that wild.
And supposedly he also had control of his, like, the diluting of his pupils, so he could make his eyes almost look black. Like, his pupil dilute so much. Or undilute? I don't know what it is called. So much that his eye looked black.
Wow.
It was really interesting. He's gross, of course. Like, I don't appreciate him. And, like, he did a lot of harm. And, of course, it's that tale of, like, people would tell Alexandria, like, he sexually assaulted me, and she fired them. Because she just had so much faith in him.
Wow. Well,
Yes.
That was Russia's own Vecna.
Yes. Abridged.
So, there you are. 3 monsters. 3 separate universes they reside in.
Right. And real quick, we didn't even mention, because we just did this episode, there's also, well, I shouldn't say we didn't mention, Dakota did mention it briefly. There's also like an MK Ultra, storyline all the way through this with like 11, and like in the second season, I know she meets up with more kids like her. So there's also that we didn't even like jump into because we have just covered MK Ultra 2 episodes back.
Yes. What do you think, Amanda? Are you excited to watch the other 2 seasons now, or are you going to wait until season 5 is out?
I'd probably wait till season 5 is out, and then I'll catch up on all of them. But yeah, I'm excited. I love Stranger Things. I always thought it was such an entertaining show.
I am definitely a New Age fan. I got on the bandwagon now, and I love it. It's really good. I really love season 3 in the mall. It's one of my favorites. Season 4 was really good, though. Y'all gotta see what 11 does with that skate. It's wild. But that'll do it for this episode of Encounters. Join us next time when we discuss the alien story of Marine veteran Terrell Copeland and the abduction of his napping experiences.
Yes, this is a more modern tale. I think this happened back in 2007. So we're excited to jump in and see what happens to Terrell.
Very excited. Again, if you like what you're hearing, make sure you follow us. Go to our YouTube, Encounters a Paranormal Experience. Watch our YouTube stuff, like and subscribe. If you, like Allie, have an episode idea that you want us to cover, go ahead and send us an email at encountersthepodcast@gmail.com and give us an idea of what you think you would like to hear. And until next time, I am Dakota.
I'm Amanda.
Stay spooky.